You're 53 years old, and you've spent your entire adult life in service to the law. Law school at UNAM, 20 years as a prosecutor, appointed to the federal bench at 44 after a career that put hundreds of criminals behind bars. You believed in the system, genuinely believed that justice could be served through proper procedure, that the courts were the last defense against chaos. Your colleagues called you incorruptible. Your family called you righteous. You called yourself a servant of something larger than yourself. Your wife is diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 51. The disease moves fast, stealing her memories, her personality, the woman you married 30 years ago. The care she needs isn't covered by your government insurance. Specialized facilities, experimental treatments, the constant attention that might slow the progression. The costs are astronomical. Your salary as a federal judge is respectable, but nowhere near enough. You burn through savings in 8 months. You take out loans that will take decades to repay. You watch your wife disappear while the bills pile up like accusations. A lawyer approaches you after a hearing. He represents clients who appreciate the difficulty of your situation, he says. Clients who have resources and who value relationships with people in positions of authority. They're not asking you to free murderers or dismiss serious cases. They're asking for small considerations, favorable bail decisions, procedural delays, the kind of discretion that judges exercise every day without anyone noticing. In exchange, your wife's care will be fully funded. Every treatment, every facility, every specialist she needs. All you have to do is listen when they call. You know what he's offering. You've spent 20 years prosecuting people who took these deals, who sold their positions for money, who justified corruption with circumstances. You know exactly what you'd become. You also know that your wife has maybe 5 years left, and those years could be spent in a state facility where she's warehoused with dozens of other patients, or in a private center where she's treated like the person she used to be. The math is impossible. The choice is already made. You take the first payment 3 days later. The requests start small, exactly as promised. A bail hearing where you set the amount low enough that the defendant can pay it. A trial delay that gives the defense time to prepare, or time for witnesses to reconsider their testimony. A procedural ruling that excludes evidence on technical grounds. Nothing that would overturn a conviction on appeal. Nothing that screams corruption to anyone watching. Just the quiet exercise of discretion in favor of people who happen to be connected to the organization. You tell yourself it's not that different from what judges do every day. Discretion is built into the system. Bail amounts vary, trial dates shift, evidence rulings go either way depending on interpretation. You're not perverting justice. You're just tilting it slightly, in specific cases, for specific reasons. The criminals you're helping would probably get off anyway with good enough lawyers. You're just making the process more efficient. The money flows to your wife's care. She's transferred to a facility in Guadalajara that specializes in Alzheimer's patients, with private rooms and round-the-clock attention and therapies that insurance would never cover. You visit every weekend, hold her hand while she struggles to remember your name. Sometimes she thinks you're her father. Sometimes she thinks you're a stranger. Sometimes, for a few precious minutes, she knows exactly who you are, and you can pretend everything is normal. Year 1. You've influenced the outcomes of 7 cases. Drug trafficking charges that resulted in acquittals when key evidence was excluded on technicalities you manufactured. Money laundering cases dismissed on procedural grounds. Deadlines missed, forms improperly filed. The bureaucratic failures that give judges cover to throw out cases that should have been slam dunks. A murder charge that ended in mistrial when you allowed the defense to introduce evidence that should have been excluded. Evidence that painted the victim as the aggressor and the killer as a man defending his territory. The defendants walk free, return to the organization, continue doing what they were doing before the inconvenience of arrest. You don't know their names. You don't want to know their names. They're just case numbers, files that cross your desk and leave again. Human beings reduced to paperwork so you don't have to think about what they'll do with the freedom you've given them. The cocaine will keep flowing. The bodies will keep appearing. The machine will keep running, oiled by your decisions. Your reputation remains intact. You're still the incorruptible judge, the prosecutor turned jurist who can't be bought, the man who put hundreds of criminals behind bars before taking the bench. Lawyers speak of you with respect. Young prosecutors dream of trying cases in your courtroom because they've heard you're fair, you're thorough, you believe in justice. The irony is so sharp, it cuts every time you hear your own name spoken with admiration. You've been bought completely, owned by people who could destroy you with a single phone call to a journalist or a federal investigator. No one suspects because the image you've built over 3 decades is so convincing, so carefully maintained. The corruption hides behind the reputation. The reputation makes the corruption possible. You are the perfect asset. Visible, respected, above suspicion, and completely controlled. A prosecutor you used to work with brings a case to your court. Her name is Carmen, and you mentored her 20 years ago when she was fresh out of law school. Major trafficking operation, dozens of defendants, the kind of case that makes careers and breaks organizations. She's prepared meticulously, built evidence walls that seem impossible to breach. Witnesses who flipped, financial records from 3 countries, physical evidence that traces the product from Colombian jungle to American streets. You recognize her passion. It's the passion you used to have, the belief that putting bad people in prison actually matters, actually changes something. She doesn't know you're about to gut her case. The calls come before the trial starts. Specific instructions about rulings, objections to sustain, evidence to exclude. The organization has studied Carmen's case and identified the pressure points. The witnesses whose testimony depends on deals that could be challenged. The evidence that was collected in ways that might not survive scrutiny. The procedural vulnerabilities that exist in every case, if you know where to look. They need you to press those pressure points, to create the gaps that will let their people walk free. The instructions are detailed, legal in their precision, clearly drafted by lawyers who understand exactly how to use the system against itself. Lawyers who might have been your colleagues in another life. You follow the instructions. Over 3 weeks of trial, you systematically dismantle the prosecution's case through rulings that are defensible on paper, but devastating in practice. Key witnesses are barred from testifying because their cooperation agreements contain ambiguities you choose to interpret strictly. Physical evidence is excluded because of technical violations in the chain of custody. Gaps of hours that are common in complex investigations, but that you treat as fatal flaws. Expert testimony is limited in ways that prevent the jury from understanding the full scope of the operation. The jury never sees the full picture because you've made sure they can't. They're good people, doing their civic duty, trying to reach a just verdict based on the evidence presented. They don't know that the evidence has been filtered through your corruption, that the case they're deciding isn't the case that was built. They see fragments and reach the only conclusion the fragments support. The defendants are acquitted. Carmen stands in the courtroom, looking stunned. 3 years of work collapsing around her, unable to understand how a case this strong could fall apart. She doesn't suspect you. Why would she? She suspects bad luck, aggressive defense attorneys, the random chance of a jury that didn't connect with the evidence. She'll spend months reviewing what went wrong, looking for the mistakes she made, never finding them because the mistake wasn't hers. The judge she trusted, the mentor she respected, was the weapon that destroyed everything she built. You go home that night and sit in your study without turning on the lights. Your wife is in her facility, well cared for, comfortable. The men you just freed will return to shipping cocaine, to ordering murders, to the business of human suffering. The equation doesn't balance. Nothing balances anymore. You pour yourself a drink and wonder when you stopped being the person you thought you were. Year 2. The requests escalate. Not just favorable rulings anymore. They want cases assigned to your court specifically, want you to intervene in investigations before charges are even filed. They have people in the prosecutor's office, people who can steer cases toward judges who will handle them appropriately. You've become part of a system within the system, a parallel justice apparatus that serves the organization's interests. A journalist starts asking questions. She's investigating judicial corruption, patterns of acquittals in drug cases, the statistical anomalies that suggest something is wrong. She doesn't have your name yet, but she's looking at the right cases, connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. You hear about her inquiries through channels that have become familiar. The organization monitors everything, knows when threats are developing, responds before those threats mature. They ask you to sign a warrant. Not a routine warrant, a search warrant for the journalist's home and office, based on evidence that's been fabricated to suggest she's involved in the very drug trade she's investigating. The warrant will destroy her credibility, end her investigation, remove the threat she poses. All you have to do is sign your name. You sign it. You tell yourself you had no choice, that refusing would have exposed you, that the journalist would have found the truth eventually and destroyed more than just you. The warrant is executed. The journalist is arrested on charges that won't stick but will devastate her career. Her investigation dies. The corruption she was tracking continues unexamined. Your wife dies in year 3. Peacefully, in her sleep, in the facility you paid for with justice sold by the pound. You hold her hand as she slips away. This woman who believed in you, who thought she was married to a man of principle. You bury her next to her parents in a cemetery outside the city, and you stand by the grave wondering if she knew, if somewhere in the disease that stole her mind, she understood what you'd become. The organization sends flowers. They send condolences through the lawyer who first approached you, along with a reminder that your relationship continues regardless of your personal circumstances. The debt isn't paid with your wife's death. The debt can never be paid. You belong to them now, and you'll belong to them until you're no longer useful. Year 4. You're promoted. Chief Justice of the Circuit, responsible for case assignments across a dozen courts with influence over which judges hear which cases. The organization's investment in you has paid dividends they didn't anticipate. You can now steer cases to friendly judges, can coordinate corruption across multiple courtrooms, can build the kind of systematic control that makes their operations virtually untouchable. You start identifying other judges who might be receptive. Men and women with financial problems, family illnesses, the vulnerable circumstances that make people consider unthinkable options. You don't recruit them directly. You just pass names to the lawyer. Note which judges seem like they might be approached. You've become a talent scout for corruption, helping the organization expand its reach into the justice system that was supposed to stop them. A young prosecutor brings a case against one of the organization's lieutenants. She's talented, passionate, reminds you of yourself 30 years ago. The evidence is strong. Testimony from witnesses who flipped. Financial records that trace the money. The kind of case that should result in conviction and serious prison time. The calls come. The instructions arrive. The case is assigned to your court. You could save her. You could rule fairly, let the evidence speak, give her the conviction she's earned. The organization would be angry, would retaliate, would probably expose you. Your career would end. Your reputation would be destroyed. You'd spend your remaining years in prison. But the case would be won. Justice would be served. The person you used to be would be honored. You don't save her. You follow the instructions, make the rulings, watch another case collapse under the weight of your corruption. The lieutenant walks free. The prosecutor stands in your courtroom with the same stunned expression your old colleague had, wondering how this happened, what went wrong. She doesn't know that what went wrong is you. She doesn't know that the system failed because the system includes people like you. Year 5. The Americans get involved. A joint task force, DEA and FBI, investigating cartel influence in the Mexican judicial system. They have informants you don't know about, surveillance you can't detect. They're building cases against judges and prosecutors and police officials, mapping the corruption that has metastasized through institutions that were supposed to be immune. Your name is on a list. You know this because the organization knows this, and they've started distancing themselves. Fewer calls, fewer payments, the careful separation that precedes betrayal. They're preparing to cut you loose, to sacrifice you if necessary to protect more valuable assets. The relationship that felt like partnership was always exploitation. You were a tool, and tools get discarded when they become liabilities. You consider running. You have money saved, enough to disappear to a country that doesn't extradite. But running means admitting what you've done, means spending whatever years you have left looking over your shoulder, means dying as the thing you became instead of the thing you were. Running means your wife died for nothing, her care funded by corruption that didn't even buy you a peaceful ending. You stay. You keep working, keep ruling, keep pretending that nothing has changed. The investigation gets closer. Colleagues start getting arrested. Judges you helped recruit disappearing into the same system they corrupted. The net is closing, and you're standing in the middle of it, waiting for hands to grab you. The arrest comes on a Monday morning. Federal agents at your door. Warrants that list decades of corruption. The evidence compiled in files that will end your life as you knew it. They read you your rights. The same rights you've read to others. The same words that used to mean something when you believed in what they represented. The trial is everything you helped others avoid. Evidence presented without exclusion. Witnesses testifying without interference. A judge who rules fairly, who doesn't take calls from lawyers representing interested parties. You sit in the defendant's chair and experience the system working the way it's supposed to work, the way you stopped letting it work years ago. The conviction takes 4 hours of deliberation. The sentence is 30 years, effectively life for a man your age. You stand in the courtroom as the judge pronounces your future, and you think about your wife, about the facility where she died in comfort, about the trade you made between her peace and everyone else's justice. You're 60 years old. You spent 30 years serving the law and 5 years destroying it. The reputation you built is ashes. The legacy you imagined is a cautionary tale that will be taught in law schools as an example of how institutions fail. Your wife's grave is in a cemetery you'll never visit again. She's buried under a headstone paid for by the cartel, in a plot purchased with money you earned by freeing killers. You served her until the end. You just stopped serving everyone else. The cell they take you to is small, concrete, indistinguishable from thousands of others. You'll die here, probably, unless the organization decides to reach you first. Former judges don't do well in prison. Former judges who helped cartels do worse. You had a choice. You told yourself you didn't, but you did. Everyone has a choice. You made yours. Now you live with it. However long that turns out to be. That's a wrap. The story is fiction, but judicial corruption is real. Right now, in courtrooms across Mexico and beyond, judges are making rulings that serve organizations instead of justice, trading their integrity for money or safety or the care of people they love. The system fails when the system's guardians fail. The robes don't make the person makes the choice. If this made you think, drop a comment. Subscribe for more.